Well, good afternoon, everybody. We are so glad that you are here with us. And before Andrew and I begin our part of the afternoon, I just want to say if you were not here earlier at 11:30, St. Genevieve, you gave us an incredible gift. Thank you. It was amazing. Thank you. And there is more to come. You are not finished yet. But my name is Courtney Wall, and I am glad to be with you today. I am here with my family, Clay, Julie, and Alethea, and I am from Griffin, Georgia. This is my third year at the Cherry Blossom Festival, and I'm just tickled pink to be here with you today. I am here because I have a very special mother-in-law. My mother-in-law, Alethea Wall, is Rosalind Carter's sister. And so I've had the honor of growing up. I have had the honor of being around them for the past 30 plus years of my life, my married life, and being able to be around the Carters and seeing how they interact in the small town of Plains and with people as a whole. And that's been a joy and an honor. And I get to share a little bit about that today. And I want to introduce to you someone very special to me and to our family. And many of you have met Andrew, and I want to say, I think personally it's harder to introduce a very special friend than it is a stranger. But this is not only my friend, but he is also like a member of our family. Now, we have spent holidays together. It's a thing now. But I want to introduce you to Andrew Greer. Andrew is a super talented individual that has shared many songs with us. He's a Dove Award nominee, singer-songwriter. He is also a filmmaker, podcast creator, and author. And he is here today to allow us to gain some insight into your newest book. And we're excited. We're excited. Thank you for being here with us today and for being willing to share more than a president.
Absolutely.
Sundays
Thank you,
with Jimmy
Courtney.
Carter.
Yes, I feel so honored just to be able to talk. I look at people here on the front row, my neighbors, George and Jan Williams, who lived this really unique history, which we may get into in a second more specifically. But President Carter teaching Sunday school at Maranatha Baptist Church from the time that he and Rosalind came home from the White House in 1981 until essentially the pandemic, until the end of 2019, when he was at that time 95 years old, still teaching. I came in like anybody else I came through the gates of Plains as a fan, as two people, Jimmy and Rosalind Carter, being heroes of mine. The primary reason for me that they were heroes of mine, I was born early on in the Reagan era. So in regard to their tenure in the White House, that was more a piece of history to me. It wasn't current. And then when I discovered about their church life, really, and about I couldn't believe, one, that a former president of the United States taught Sunday school in an A-frame building that holds maybe 250 shoulder to shoulder, 300 shoulder to shoulder, that you could go and that you could participate in these Sunday school lessons. But then that someone who had ascended to arguably the most powerful position in the world still submitted himself to a local congregation as a congregant, not as their pastor, not as a paid leader, but as a fellow congregant, and then to volunteer as a layman to teach Sunday school on average half of the Sundays in a year, while he and Rosalind are traveling the world in their work with the Carter Center, of course. So all that was extremely fascinating to me, and I had never really witnessed two people who interacted, who worked in the public square, that were attempting to follow in the footsteps of Jesus as squarely as the two of them did. And so that's what first drew me in. Ask some questions.
It was a huge part of their life, and what made them so humble, and what made them a blessing to so many people. But I want to ask you, and I think this is probably the first question that would come to mind with a lot of people. When I first heard about this book, I told you, I said, Andrew, I can't believe that this has not been done before, because so many people knew that he was such a great teacher. And I can remember for years we would go to visit Plains, Georgia, and we knew that Jimmy was in town teaching because you could look at the parking lot of Maranatha Baptist Church, and it was not hard to discern if Jimmy was there or not. And so these are precious to so many folks. How did this book come into fruition?
Yeah, I think, one, they were so important to me. His lessons in that part of his life were so important to me. And when something's important to me, I begin to research it. I like to know all the details, and I like to know the people who are adjacent to that or who are participating in it. And so it really was a matter, I started doing my research on where are these lessons living. There really are not many online. There are a few on YouTube when some local news stations or regional news stations would come in and have permission to maybe film one. You'll find a couple of those on YouTube in his much later years. You'll definitely find some articles about it. There were some audio recordings of a very select amount about 20 years ago that were in a CD format. They weren't even in a digital format. So nowadays that means no one can listen to them. And then there was also a devotional styled book where that had been deeply edited. We're taking ideas from his lessons and putting them in like a daily reading, a morning type devotional reading with a scripture verse attached to it. But when I attended the lessons, when I listened to the lessons, I realized there was so much insight. I mean, this man loved the scriptures. And not only did he love the scriptures, he had a wealth of world history experience. You pair those things together, this ancient and yet alive text of the scriptures, a love for that, with so much insight into the world and into the people who live in the world. You pair those things together and you come up with lessons that are very rich in insight and in information, but also in devotion. It has all those things paired together. And so when I first started talking to some of my publisher friends, at first in Nashville and then in Macon, and Mercer University Press in Macon ended up publishing it, we all agreed they've never been published in depth. They've never been able to let people read through the entire lesson and get all of those insights and glean. So I started then rummaging around. Jan, you know how I do. And wherever I'm not invited, I tend to go. And so I got in the church library and started seeing a lot of these recordings. The church had done a wonderful job. George, you were a part of that too, of filming, of recording these lessons and then later filming these lessons for posterity. So fortunately, there were a lot of lessons to choose from that could then be transcribed. So then this may be answering a question, but a lot of people say, how did you choose which ones? Because there's 15 chapters.
There is much to choose from.
I think even in recorded archival, there are probably over 1,000 or more lessons that President Carter taught that are just available in archival somewhere. But then you think throughout his life how many lessons he taught. You're talking about thousands. And so I went through, books of the Bible. I found a spreadsheet that said, here's this lessons from this book of the Bible. And I started looking, let's go in the Old Testament and grab a few. Let's go in the New Testament and grab a few. Let's go to, he taught one on Ecclesiastes. No one knows what that book means. Let's grab that one, And really, what would be intriguing and interesting to me as a Christian, and then also as someone who loves the history of Jimmy Carter and of Plains, Georgia. And then I started looking at the topics. It would title the lessons, and I would see if that would pique the interest. And then after spending probably a year just listening, I started paring them down and going, what would actually translate on the written page? Because he didn't deliver these lessons to be written down. That was not the intent. The intent was an informal conversation, Bible study with the Sunday school class. And so that's kind of what played into what ended up in More Than a President.
Now, these lessons span a good deal of time, I think from the 1970s to the 2010s. I'm curious, as you put them together and chose which lessons went into the book, did you notice a progression in his faith as he got older?
Well, I think that the central aspect of his faith, a surrender to Jesus, that was always central. He was grounded in that. But I think how that then informs our life as we live more life and as we are in relationship with more people and we understand all the nuances and all the gray material that each of us have to work through in the journeys of our life, I think that begins to then shape some of how we then, when we go back to the scripture, well, how might that apply to that person and that experience or this new experience in my life? So what I saw and I think this also is maybe an advantage of living a long life. I think, I don't know yet, I'm halfway there, but if I get to live long enough, I think some of the things I'm so controlling of and so tight about and just think it has to be this way, you know, and some of that's a bent towards justice. I want people to be served well and I want people to be served equally. But as I get older, it begins to kind of, not dissolve, but almost like cement into the real core of what does our faith demand of us. And right? And it's the scripture from Micah that he used in his inauguration speech, right? Yep. Which is about humility and service, mercy and love. And so I did see his lessons begin to distill. I think that's the word I'm working on, to distill into love.
What does the Lord require of you?
That's right.
To walk humbly with your God. Yeah.
See, now Courtney, she didn't say this about herself, but she's a seminarian. So this woman is a minister.
That means I know enough to be dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah, she can peg me is what it means. But Courtney has preached, has filled in for us several times. Well, one, President Carter used to ask you to come fill in occasionally during his lifetime.
I was allowed to preach one time when he was alive, and God bless the congregation. You guys were there. My twins were very little, and so I was a new mom just trying to figure all that out, and Jimmy and Rosalind allowed me to come in and speak. It was a gift.
Yeah. Well, Courtney has been a huge gift to our congregation and her family to our town, so I'll just add that in there. They're incredible people, and I'm lucky that Courtney would say yes to doing this. So,
thank you.
You're welcome.
I have another question.
Okay.
So I've been thinking, as I read through the book, what you have here is a very complex individual, and we all know that. And so we have the Jimmy that was the international statesman, and then we had the Jimmy with a hammer in his hand that was helping the unfortunate to get a home. We had the Jimmy that would go in and teach on Sunday mornings. How do you balance all of those layers as you compiled the Sunday school lessons?
Well, I don't know if I get to balance them. How did he balance them, and how is that represented in the lessons he taught? It makes me think of this. I was listening and watching lessons when I was doing my research, and in the end of 2015, I saw a lesson that it was marked, that it was a President Carter that he taught. But Kim, his niece, who taught on non-Jimmy Sundays, if you will, was teaching on it. So I thought it was just marked incorrectly. But there were a lot of people there. So I thought, well, it must have been a Jimmy Sunday. So Kim was teaching, and she said in the beginning, he will be here. I know I'm not who you were expecting. He's never been late to Sunday school, but he'll be here. And she said, he can explain to you why, but I'm going to start the lesson. He called and asked if I would just start the lesson. Thank you for being here. So she did. He walked in eventually, and he did apologize for being late. He said the only time he'd ever been late to teach, which does not surprise me at all. But the reason was that one of his grandsons, at 28 years old, I believe, Jeremy, had just passed away unexpectedly the night before. And of course, he and Rosalind went up to Peachtree City to be with their family. But he had come back. It's kind of almost ununderstandable. You think, well, if I had been him and in his grandfather's shoes, I probably would have just said, I can't be there. But he needed to be there. And this is an answer to your question. I started to realize he had to be there. He had to be there not only to uphold his commitment to the people who had come. Yeah, that was important. But I think he had to press into the scriptures in the midnight of his grief. I think he had to teach to begin to parcel through how to understand what is not understandable. and that is being a nonagenarian and your grandchild in his 20s passing away. And so I feel like that's kind of an answer, in that with all his complexities of being his very specific human being, of being Jimmy Carter, this was home base. This was ground floor. This was where the rubber met the road for him. And I think for many of us, that's an incredible example.
He's known for being an amazing teacher, and I love that story of that particular day when he showed up against all odds. Right. I mean, because most of us, we wouldn't have been, I wouldn't have been there, but he was there, and you outlined it perfectly, the reasoning behind that. An amazing teacher. I want to ask you, as you wrote the book, as you compiled these lessons, you sifted through a lot, like we've already said. These were chosen to be in the book. Is there one in here in particular that stands out to you, that has ministered to you, and that has changed the way you do life, impact the way that you live?
Well, the one that stands out to me, there's actually a pair in the section. It's sectioned by decades. So he taught at the First Baptist Church of the city of Washington, D.C., while he was president of the United States. Can you even imagine? Let that sink in for a minute. While sitting in the Oval Office, he taught a couples class. He didn't teach the church with all the press there for a moment. He taught because he was asked by his Sunday school director, would you teach one Sunday? And then he taught about 14 times in his presidency. But the lesson that stands out to me is in the 2000s. He did a series of lessons in Jonah, which Jonah, it was interesting. Kim was teaching our Sunday school at the time, and she was teaching on Jonah. And I'd realized I just hadn't really thought about Jonah since I was a kid. And what do we all know about Jonah? Jonah and the big fish, right? The whale and getting swallowed. This just incredible story. But really, Jonah, to me, as I listened to Kim teach, and then these came up in my archival to start listening to that week, so it was kind of all coming together at the same time, is really about biases. It's about prejudice. It's about being obedient to God's call of mercy to everybody, right? The Ninevites were essentially, you can correct me on this, but were enemies of Israel. And Jonah is being asked to essentially deliver a second chance from God, right, to the Ninevites, who are his enemy, essentially. And he says, no way. I'm not going to extend mercy. And I think about our humanity, our human nature, my humanity, my human nature. And the plumb line of our faith is mercy and grace, another opportunity. That the love of God is so unconditional, we get chance upon chance. Do we take advantage of the chances we can get through all that? No. But mercy and grace are extended to us, bar none. And yet, when I'm asked to extend grace or forgiveness to someone who has hurt me, or someone who I don't understand, or someone who I think is in the wrong, or someone who I just don't like, no thanks. And so our human nature that we experience and struggle with and tug of war with today, that's what's so interesting about the stories in the Bible and what President Carter drew out of them. It's our story, it's our human nature, and it's our opportunity to move past our human nature into what I believe the Spirit of God has imbued us with, and that is the possibility to reflect Jesus and his grace and forgiveness. So those lessons were interesting to me, one, because I always need a reminder to get over my prejudices, to move beyond our biases. But then two, the humility that's expressed in that is the explicit responsibility, I believe, of people who are attempting to follow after God and Jesus.
That's right. As he taught, I always had the feeling that he wanted people to see themselves in the story. Yeah. And to get down there where the rubber meets the road. And one technique that he used was to ask great questions. And you couldn't not answer his questions. His questions demanded an answer. They were not rhetorical. And you've done a great job in the book of demonstrating that, and you've shown the questions that he's asked and the answers that were given to those questions. And I, for one, respect that.
It's interesting. We put in italics the congregants' responses because we wanted you to be in the pew. How many of you happen to get to come to one of President Carter's Sunday school lessons? Yeah. So actually sprinkled across the room quite a few of you. So you remember, and that's the idea of putting the congregants' responses in italics, is that that becomes you in the pew, or your seatmate in the pew, puts you in the room. But I do think it's interesting, President Carter, and you can affirm this or say I'm wrong, but I really don't feel like he ever put himself above the class in the sense of we're learning this together. In fact, a couple of times he would say, I caught on that one thing he would say somewhat frequently is, I don't think that, but you can. If there was something that he knew was kind of a controversial topic, or maybe people had different interpretations on a certain passage or what the implication of that was in our life, he'd go, here's what I think. And if that felt a little controversial just in the general public, he might say, but you don't have to think that.
It was like a journey
that
he was on with the class.
Well, and it also is an example that God is not going to be eliminated because I have a different opinion than you. You know, that the bigness and the beautiful kind of mystery of God is not changed just because we're still working it out.
And I'm glad you said that, because I had another question I wanted to ask you about. So knowing that, I can't, no more, I'm out. Knowing that.
They are looking a little sleepy.
Then we got to wake them up. Where's those cookies y'all brought in with you? Knowing that, and knowing how polarized our culture is now, how do you see this book being able to bridge the divide in our culture today?
Well, that's a big question. I think what I love is that we see someone who was a civic servant, you know, a servant of his country and of his government, who prioritized his faith, that those things were commingling, you know, that they weren't, he wasn't totally compartmentalizing, right? It wasn't like I'm a man of faith on Sunday, and then I'm the president or the governor or a humanitarian on Monday through Saturday. So in answer to your question, I think what this can be an example of is that our politics, a person is not the sum of their politics.
Right.
And for those of us who are persons of faith, who are attempting again to pattern our lives after the life of Jesus, and I would say it's true for even if you're not, that's not a part of your scope of living or spirituality. Jesus is a meeting point that is both higher and lower and wider than any political opinion or party affiliation that I could ever adhere to. There is something more beautiful, more pure, more true than any opinion I have about guns or marriage or abortion or Trump. You know, those just fade into insignificance compared to the trueness of life with Jesus. And I think for Jimmy and Rosalind, that was so palpable and so obvious. And so that's more than a president. I didn't come up with that title, the publisher did. They sent a list of titles. I actually landed on something else, and everyone was like, no. And so they're right, though, because that was just a part of his life, being president. But so was being a neighbor in Plains, and so was being a Sunday school teacher, and so was being a Nobel Peace Prize winner. But those were just parts and pieces.
They saw the person, not the perspectives.
100%. I think people think, George and Jan, I think people think he walked around politicking in town. Did he ever talk about politics with his neighbors? No. And we all have different opinions. I would say Plains is about 50-50 kind of. If you go Democrat, Republican, we kind of cancel each other out. It's a very neighborly thing to do, isn't it? You know? Yeah, you go vote, I'll come right behind you, you know? And so, yes, to your point.
I remember family reunions, and they would be at our family reunions, and politics was a subject that was not to come up. It never did. We enjoyed one another. We had a good time with one another. Did we have the same political beliefs? No, but we had a great time, and politics never came up. Plains, we've had some great reunions in Plains, great times in Plains. And I wanted to ask you, you live there now.
Yeah.
So who would have thought? Yeah. But you lived many years in the Nashville area in Franklin, Tennessee. What brought you to Plains, Georgia?
Well, Jimmy and Rosalind Carter. I mean, same thing as everybody else as a tourist, as a visitor. But it was the people of Plains that kept me there. And they were two of those people, but it was George and Jan, and it was Kim, and it was all, and it was honestly, I mean, as I got to know you guys, who I know y'all don't live in Plains right now, but these guys have done an amazing job, I would say restoring, you feel like that's the right word, Mother Allie's house, which is Rosalind's childhood home and Alethia's childhood home. They've restored it, so now you can stay in it. You can rent it to stay in it. And it's got like, this is an aside, but they have put things in there that are so valuable that when I first walked in, I was like, you should not do this, you know? And I think maybe it was Alethea or maybe it was you, Clay, I don't know, but someone said, well, it might as well be used. It's very their temperature and their disposition to, y'all are very generous people and you're generous to Plains. Just thrilled that you guys are around. There's the White House painting of Mother Allie hanging up in the, maybe I shouldn't advertise all that.
You better be careful.
I know, because now they're going to come rent it and steal it. But they said they didn't care. So.
The little lady over there with the white hair wanted it to look exactly how she remembered it growing up and when Mother Allie was there.
Yeah.
And Rosalind grew up in a home full of love. And we wanted people to feel that when they walked through the door.
Well, and that's indicative of Plains. It's a small town. I grew up in a small town in Texas, but I loved it. I loved that we knew each other. I loved that we had conflict with each other, but you didn't run. You couldn't go hide. You know, you may need to talk it out. And tonight I may need to go home and close the curtains and not think about you, but tomorrow we're going to come back out on the porch and we'll figure it out together. I think that's a really beautiful picture of how we're designed to live, which is in community. And so I like some of that. I know sometimes we crave autonomy, and so we move in our neighborhoods where we don't know our neighbors, and that protects us from that. But it's good to be neighbors with people. It's good to be family. It's good to disagree, and we learn something from our disagreements. So I love all that. But what I would call that is love, you know. So I was drawn in by love, and also a different pace of life that I had been missing since Nashville had grown to what Nashville has grown into, which is a really cool place to visit. But it was too big for me to live in. So people, I mean, trust me, people go, what? Plains has are we still saying 600 people? Yeah, that's about right. And it's always been about 600 people. But it's a very unique place with a lot of unique people, a lot of unique thoughts and ideas, and there's something in the soil. And I felt it.
Do you want to say a little bit about your documentary?
I can, in the sense of what really cemented my relationships with everybody in town was getting to film a documentary for PBS called Plains Spoken. And that was all set in Plains. And it's about race relationships in everyday community, which Plains does an incredible job of exempling what it could mean to live in community when you don't always get along or where there's tensions that are historic. A lot of towns don't bridge those gaps, don't walk across that train track, and Plains does. And so I really give credit to Plains to letting me, not at that time being a citizen, not living, still having my Tennessee plates, giving me maybe not the permission, but the long leash to go explore a dicey topic with them in focus. Honestly, that's probably what drew me in most, was that I don't know that everyone loved the documentary, but there was still space for me with my thoughts and ideas translated this way. I don't know, that was a big deal to me. And so I'm thrilled. I love documentary making. I'm in another one now that it's not set in Plains, so they get a break from being on camera. But anyway, I don't know if that answers your question, except for that's what really cemented the relationship.
Right. Do you have any can you surprise us or give us some details on any upcoming Carter
Surprise.
projects you have?
I don't think I have any surprises, but there's a couple things. I'm thrilled that, these guys in Plains just lived it. And I say just, not in diminishing it, but like it was everyday life. Jimmy and Rose are neighbors, their family, their friends, they're someone's aunt and uncle and cousin. And yes, y'all understood that he'd become president of the United States, but that didn't change who they were to you or who they were as they interacted in the community and in the world. So I'm honored to get a chance to kind of explore the historicity of that and the bigness of that, because I come from outside of it. So I'm like, whoa, this is crazy, And they're like, whatever, So with that, immediately there is an audiobook because these lessons were recorded. These are Jimmy's words, right? These aren't my words. These are his words. And so so many people consume audiobooks nowadays. And so that will give a chance for this to be heard. You can really hear him through the whole thing. And in that audiobook, we didn't have to edit it as deeply as you would for the written word. So here's a little bit more of that interaction. I'll still read the little introductions I wrote to help contextualize their life. And then we're going to have interviews in the audiobook with some different figures that speak into their spiritual life. Like we'll have Andrew Young because he'll talk about the 1970s era, right? But Jonathan Reckford, the CEO of Habitat for Humanity, is going to talk about the 2000s, etc. So we're going to put it all together in a very palatable way so that you can, Jimmy may not be here in bodily form with us anymore, but as we know, in the mystery of life, our spirits do live on, our legacies live on, our love lives on, and sometimes it helps to hear a voice again, to be reminded of how that love is still in the room. And so I hope that's what that does. And then there's some other neat things maybe, depending on how everything shakes down.
I love how you said that when you were selecting the different lessons, how you took a little snippet from every section of Scripture, and so it runs the gamut of all of Scripture. I love that because many times in our lives, when we're thinking about our own story and we align it with God's story, all of a sudden the things that we're going through become a lot smaller, and that's very therapeutic in a way. And so when we get a glimpse of the all of Scripture, that helps us to get a bigger grasp of God's plan. I'm curious, as people read this book, I know that you've had people come to you and say, Andrew, really love the book. This lesson in particular, it just really, really shaped my life. It helped me out so much. Could you and would you let us in on some of the feedback that you've gotten about readers and how it has helped their lives?
Yeah, I think, well, first, as I've toured the country with it, readers are really interested in Plains. This is a window to them of his commitment to his community. So that's something that people are really, really interested in. As it comes to the lessons, I think they're just fascinated that he was working it out on the page. I don't think there's one lesson that stands out. Maybe, I'm sure for individuals there is, but more the feedback I've been getting is, man, he was working it out too. And that's cool because we live in kind of is dogmatic the right word, or like a culture where we have to know what's right. This is the way you're supposed to go on this subject or this subject or this subject.
There's a lot of black and white and not a lot of gray.
That's right. And he was willing to sit in the gray even in his spiritual life, because the fact is, has anyone in here gotten to the end of God? Yeah. I don't know that we ever will. I know you got questions about God right now. Yeah. And it doesn't mean, when we ask questions of one another, when we seek understanding from someone else, it's because we want to know them deeper. It's not a diminishing them or doubting them. But if I think that you and Clay have been married 30 years, right?
32.
32, yeah. Godspeed, Courtney. But do you know everything about Clay?
Yeah.
It's not true, is it, Clay? So if I think about people, George and Jan, how long have y'all been married? 55. George and Becky? 58? Okay, so if you think about these long years, and you could go around the room and there's more examples of that, and you don't get to the end of each other, how would we ever get to the end of God? And isn't that part of relating? Isn't that part of the beauty of getting to know one another and being intimate with one another and getting to know each other on deeper and deeper levels? Is that, oh my gosh, it's infinite. So I think he really grasped that. You can't grasp it. I think he was really plugged into that we don't get to the end of this. We just get to explore it a little bit deeper. It's like, and we'll move on. I was rafting the Colorado River one time in the Grand Canyon. And there was a geologist on the trip with our group. And it was really cool because every morning he'd pull out maps of the canyon as it's changed through the years, right? As it's evolved through environmental circumstances. And he would always say, it was really cool, he would say, this is what we know as of today. You know, hasn't all been uncovered. Haven't gotten to the bottom of that. Don't think we ever will. And so I think in some ways he was a geologist of Scripture for us. It was like, and today we know a little more. And tomorrow we'll know a little more. And after my lifetime, you'll find out a little more. So it's an endless journey, and I find a lot of comfort in that.
It speaks to his humility, too.
Absolutely.
As he went forward.
Yes. Do you, before we head out, we're actually doing good on time, but would you like me to read just a small snippet of something that kind of samples the, I don't feel right reading his words, because those are his to express, and yours to read when you purchase the book. But anyway. Okay, but this is an introduction to the last year. The last section was 2019, just the last year he taught. And so this is what I wrote about the experience in those later years of President Carter's Sunday school lessons. His Bible had been beat up a bit. The small leather-bound copy resembled any old good book you might see cradled in the hand of a church-going deacon in the South on any given Sunday. Church bulletins were sandwiched between the onion skin pages, providing a simple solution for bookmarking important passages of Scripture. This Bible was taken care of but very well used, and along the lower right-hand edge, gently embossed into the soft black leather cover, was the name of that volume's main readership, Jimmy Carter. Now, if a person's Bible reflected his life, Jimmy's Bible was on target. Having lived a very full life, he was wearing out too. In the time that transpired between Sunday, January 6, 2019, Carter's first Sunday school lesson taught at Maranatha that year, and Sunday, November 3rd, 2019, the last time he would approach the lectern to lead, his usually brisk stamina slowed from a visible shift in age. In May of that year, Jimmy, at the age of 94, fell at home in Plains and broke his hip. The Carter's family and friends and the concerned public were apprehensive, understandably so. The statistics are undeniable, right? For persons over 90, fracturing a hip often commences the beginning of the end. Of course, this is Jimmy Carter we're talking about. The man was already a legend. But with such high levels of continued engagement at home and around the world into his 90s, and seeming to defy his advanced age at every turn, Carter was becoming a myth. As his longtime close spiritual friend Andrew Young commented, he's a pure Calvinist, the kind of man who's got to wake up every morning with a full schedule. True to his mythical form, a few Sundays after undergoing hip surgery, Jimmy was back in the saddle at Maranatha. His speech was paced and his appearance was a touch tentative, but he was behind his familiar pulpit once again, exerting one of his life's constants, which was teaching the Bible. And he opened the lesson with his customary query, "Do we have any visitors here?" And laughter would ensue. And as he surveyed the crowd, asking where they had come from to attend church that day, someone hollered out, "Washington, D.C." And with a twinkle in his eye and that trademark toothy grin, he replied, "I used to live there." The crowd erupted, and for a moment, the world let out a collective sigh. But even before falling, Carter had become increasingly unsteady on his feet. He was adamant that he was most comfortable and effective teaching his lessons standing. He liked to pace the floor, lecturing in a conversational, thinking out loud manner, and often engaging the crowd with questions about what a certain text or particular parable from Scripture might mean. He would recall scenes from his life at home in Plains or in his work with communities around the globe through the Carter Center as a way to share how his own faith found expression in daily life. But a friend was concerned about his health, so after inviting Jimmy and Rosalind over for dinner and a heart-to-heart conversation, a design for a motorized chair was agreed upon and within weeks implemented at the church. Though he hardly wanted to be relegated to an electric stool, Carter's humor remained intact. At the beginning of each class, as he sat down, he mentioned his special chair that the church made for really old people. And at the same time, from across the room, a church member raised the chair with a remote control, and the room would swell with laughter as the former president of the free world was gently lifted to the height of the lectern so he could be seen by all. The antic added whimsy to the seriousness of advancing age, drawing a big laugh and setting the crowd and their teacher at ease. Now here's the thing. In the twilight of his life, the thrust of President Carter's lessons became more and more focused. Less about mining for some untapped theological insight or rousing a religious debate, Carter's messages centered on themes of seeking justice, of cultivating peace, of measuring success by God's standards and loving our neighbors without condition. As the Carter's second son, Chip, shared in a tribute to his parents as a part of their 75th wedding anniversary in Plains in 2021, quote, "They taught us their values, Christian values, Plains, Georgia values. They taught us that every person deserves our respect, regardless of their wealth, their race, their age, their politics, their sex, their sexual orientation, or the amount of power that they had. They taught us to love our neighbors and to help them when needed." That same year, in a recorded conversation that I shared with President Carter, I asked the former leader with a lifetime of experiences under his belt, if you were to leave this world with one single message, what would that message be? And he replied with this: "My religious faith is very important to me, and I would just like for the teachings of Jesus Christ to be implemented in the whole world. That is, to love one another and have complete equality and treatment of all people and treat each other the way we would like for them to treat us." Perhaps all the wisdom gained over a lifetime, even one as extraordinary as Jimmy Carter's, can be summed up by a single truth. And the greatest of these is love. That's right. Okay. All right, I'm going to close this little section with a song that I wrote about thinking about Jimmy and Rosen, but thinking about George and Jan, and thinking about Mary, and thinking about a lot of people in Plains, and that I wrote on the night Mrs. Carter passed away. And then we'll have a few questions if you have some, and then St. Genevieve, I really want you to close out our time with something meaningful, okay? If you don't have anything meaningful, whatever, Pete, whatever you got. All right, so this song, I love sad songs. Just part of it. And I was thinking about all of the people who live in a place like Plains and who have grown up in a specific space, you know, a certain region, and have stayed there. And what I mean by stayed is not that they haven't had other experiences, not that they haven't traveled, not that they haven't received an education that taught them some skill or got them into some profession, but they really committed to a certain region, you know, an outline of a certain place. And what that can do in influencing a life. So here's what I came up with. I wrote it, but I don't remember all the words to it, so I hope this works out. Okay. That phone's getting smaller and smaller. Whew. Okay. it's a gentle song, so just listen close. Lay me down in the red dirt clay, 'neath the hum of Mary's song. Hear that train car hum and moan along the lines in the fields of home. The ease and bend of a stitch and hem, hands along the wither of my old friend. Every trot and lope, every step he knows, young and free in the fields of home. Let the day fade out on me, to the night spill all my dreams in this earth. Rest these bones, lay me down in the fields of home. Okay, thank you. His old hands have known this land, and I have known him strong and kind. From these thorns we have bloomed and grown in the love, in the fields of home. Let the day fade out on me, to the night spill all my dreams in this earth. Rest these bones, lay me down in the fields of home. Oh, 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 oh. Lay me down in the fields of home. If I die before I wake, let the ground here sing my memory. In the distant sky, hear love's longing cry. Call me out to the fields of home. Call me on to the fields of home. Let's see if there's some quick questions. We've got just a second. Are there any questions before St. G closes us out with a beautiful song? Any at all? And great.
You must have done a great job.
You did a great job. So we're going to, St. G, why don't you come on up? We're going to have them close us out with a song. And then what we'll do is in the foyer, so we have the book here, More Than a President. I'm going to have Jan Williams, who's one of the stalwarts of Sunday school. She was the boss of Sunday school. Many of you know Jan. Yeah. She either opened the door or shut you down. Just had to be nice, didn't you, Jan? And so she's going to be out there, and Alethea, Rosalind's young sister, is also going to be out there to sign the book with me. Isn't that wonderful, Alethea? Okay. So we'll be out there with the books afterwards. And real quick, for everyone during this presentation, we have a magazine that features Alethea and Mother Allie's home from our region. Sumter County Living is a beautiful magazine. And so they offered us some copies to offer today as you come get the book. And then there's also an article about some bozo named Andrew. And so we're going to give those to you along with that. And then there's also pamphlets out there about Mother Allie's house. We would love for you to come to Plains. You remember this, Jimmy would always tell people you were always welcome here in Plains, and we continue that spirit. And so I can tell you Mother Allie's house is beautiful, a beautiful place to stay. It's very clean, and I'm very nitpicky about tidy and cleanliness. And the sheets are just bleached white. I don't even have to look at them twice. So that's all I got. Yeah, yay, right? I know. Okay, what you got for us? Wait, let me listen, okay? Let me get on there.
Thanks, Andrew.
Oh, Pete, please. Yes, you can, wherever you want.
So, you also heard that